Hello, and welcome to episode 29 of Poetry Worth Hearing, hosted by me, Kathleen McPhillamy, and with music by Alex Heen. This episode is exploring relationships between poetry, spoken word, and music. Some people reject the idea of accompanying a spoken text with music, arguing that a spoken word poetry text has its own music, made up of rhythm, meter, alliteration, assonance, rhyme, and all the other forms of repetition, as well as the aural effects of frigatives, plosives, long, unstopped vowel sounds, etc. This perspective fails to acknowledge very effective combinations of poetic text and music. One of the most electrifying evenings I have ever spent was at Brand New Ancients by Kay Tempest, where a book-long poem was performed with the support of a small jazz combo. Homer is said to have sung his epics to the accompaniment of a lyre, and the harp has a central part in the history and legend of the Irish bards. Music and words have always gone together, whether in song, nursery rhyme, opera, or liturgy. Notably, music seems to have been particularly important when the words are public or intended to bring people together. In this episode, we will hear different combinations of poetry and music. Malcolm Atkins, musician and composer, will talk about his work setting words to music. Diana Sanders curates the selection of poems in soundscapes, and Sarah Acton reads a section from her long poem, Book of the X, accompanied by musician Emma Welton. We also have some poems which are not accompanied by music, but which relate to music, by Paul Stevenson, Derek Selden, and Claire Parker. Details of all the artists and their work can be found at poetryworthhearing.biz. We begin with two poems by Paul Stevenson.
Redecorating. Once the ties and belts and shoes were gone, and the inhalers had been binned, the carpets hoovered clean of dust, psoriasis, flaking skin, the hand-sprung mattress that hadn't much use was upended, protector-sleeved, put into storage. After the walls were repainted and parquet laid, new windows put in. The corners were filled with keyboards and guitars and a music stand. There were songs, movements, favourite scores. People practised. His old room, a symphony. Tape cassettes. Then one day my mother took off her wedding ring. She was pouring 6 o'clock tea and my father noticed, bit his tongue. Replacing the cosy, her retreat was a tray with handles. She removed herself to the confines of the kitchen, peeled and listened to her tapes, kept turning over. Phantom of the Opera, she played at night. All afternoon, John Denver.
Malcolm Atkins describes himself as a lapsed Marxist composer-performer whose main interest is bringing communities together through sharing the combinations of sounds and movements that define our cultural identities. Here Malcolm talks about how he sets words to music in a variety of different contexts.
My interest in setting text, well, anybody who plays music has to play with text. I played in a lot of bands as a teenager and into my adult life. But my real interest in setting text probably started with working with shoestring theatre, who used to put on Greek tragedy, and I really liked the attitude of Dennis Douglas, who was running it then, of actually making Greek tragedy a musical experience. I had done a classics degree, and I was very struck by how in the ancient world music and text were inseparable. I think it's a real problem of our world that we've made that very strict divide. I don't think the idea for the ancient Greeks, probably for the Romans as well, the idea of separating melody and text was just totally alien. And there are so many cultures around the world which still seem to apply that. So many in South Asia and Africa. It's very much a Western streamlining, I think, of product, of the text as a product, of music as a product. Each is owned, each has to be respected within a certain tradition and kept to a certain tradition, and I find that very constraining. So I was always really keen to play with the setting of music. I was very interested in the fact in the ancient Greek tragedies there was an improvising musician playing the aulos all the way through and leading. So much of the text was scored. I went on to work. I kind of helped re-establish the Oxford Improvisers in the year 2000, and I was really interested in the fact that free improvisation is often seen as inaccessible to a lot of people, but actually when you combine text, read text, recited text, and dance, and people get a route into what is often quite complicated kind of music. So I worked a lot with different poets. Poets I kind of particularly like working with were Vani Kapildeo, who was in Oxford at that time. Mohan Rana, an amazing Hindi poet who lives in Bath. I met him when we were performing Bhutto in Bath, and so I set some of his poems, which are, I think are really powerful. And we got poets joining us with the Oxford Improvisers when we put on performances, and we set and use poems. And at the same time, I suppose I was developing an interest in composition where I set poems by Gerard Manley Hopkins. I've always been fascinated by Gerard Manley Hopkins as the most difficult poet imaginable to set. And then in contrast, I was always interested in Blake as perhaps, someone who already wrote songs and someone whose work was actually much easier to set because it was already in a song format. But just taking different poems, and these difficult poets like Hopkins and other kind of mystical poets, they kind of force you to create something different with the musical backing because of the complexity of the words and the setting. So yeah, that's how I got into doing this, and I've carried on. I've got more and more interested in setting text. The Confluence Collective was set up to share people's cultural output in Oxford, given the fact that Oxford is a microcosm of the insanity of the British class system and its divides, which lead to kind of racial divides as well. We set up Confluence as a way of bringing cultures together and respecting cultural traditions of all, and learning from them and sharing them. So that includes music, dance, poetry, food, anything that's an expression of your unique cultural identity and your individuality within that cultural context. So a lot of poetry has been read at Confluence since we set it up over 10 years ago, and that's become a space where we often experiment with accompanying poetry. That can be Iranian, it can be poetry in Farsi, it can be poetry translated from Farsi, it can be poetry in Punjabi, as we've from Nuzhat. It's a space to experiment, and the fact that each tradition has its own kind of sonic properties. I mean, Adnan Al-Saig, who I think is an amazing poet, has a particular method of delivery which I've been told, I don't know enough about this, but I've been told that Iraqi poets are famous for their methods of delivery, and he has this incredible method of delivery which changes the sonic potential of those words. It really enhances them. And I think different traditions, Farsi speakers, they have different ways of giving the text, which I'm sure actually also links into melodic expression in those cultures as well. But just the recitation of poetry from different cultural backgrounds actually shows how a language and the delivery of that language is so unique. And it's so important to hear that and to realise the potential of that. And so that's something I've become very interested in. I have set quite a lot of ancient texts as well. I actually really like setting Latin. I write quite a lot of music for churches, and I quite like setting Latin because that has a real sonic potential. And I've also been very interested in setting the works of Ovid because I was in a group called Avid for Ovid where we tried to recreate Roman dance, the power of Roman dance as the most popular art form in ancient Rome. And this would involve dancers telling stories, and we chose a lot from Metamorphoses. And setting Ovid is, in fact, and Ovid is probably my favourite Roman poet, because he's so amazingly subversive, and his use of language and his use of sound is, to me, is quite amazing. But I think, there are so many poets from different cultural backgrounds from around the world. I mentioned Mohan Rana. I mean, his particular delivery of Hindi is quite incredible. It has so much power. Even if you don't understand the language, you can be moved, as you can with Adnan Alsay's delivery. I mean, these things can have a real impact, even if you don't understand the complexity of the words. I set The Windhover because I think it's an absolutely amazing poem, but also one that I wasn't sure it would be possible to set. And the way of setting it was very much through composed, where I was going through each phrase in turn at the piano, working out a way of harmonising and dealing with each phrase, because it has transitioned so much, unlike the kind of Blake settings where you've really got set stanzas which can repeat or vary on the basis of a starting pattern. There's no real pattern to me in setting The Windhover, in the sense that the sense of the words, the fluidity of the words, the fluidity of the images is so constant. So to me, any Hopkins verses really have to be kind of carefully through composed at the piano, and repetition is far more limited than it would be in a normal song. And I think you pointed out that someone who knows that poem very well might find the setting difficult, because the setting is quite difficult to follow. But for me, it's a different interpretation of the poem to put music to it. I think it's a valid interpretation, but it doesn't detract from other interpretations. It's my interpretation of how I would say that I would express through, and it's only using the piano, obviously it's not using a lot of instruments, but it's through tone and harmony and rhythm, an interpretation of perhaps one of the most difficult, definitely I would say about the most difficult 19th century poem I could find to set. Yeah, I set London because as a contemporary, well, it applies as much as a vision of London now as it did then. I even tried updating the Blake to call it Londongrad myself, because I feel that poem is so powerful, and it lends so much to a contemporary critic of London. And the setting with all Blake, because they are songs, they're songs of innocence and experience, the setting is much easier. It's much easier to get a kind of a groove, a rhythm going around the text, which is what I did. I used reggae. I've played in reggae bands for years, but I also used reggae because it is one of our contemporary folk musics. It's an urban folk music, and so again is very applicable to London. Kieran Walsh sang it. Kieran's got an amazing delivery in this song, but Kieran also has done a lot of work reciting poetry. He worked a lot with Heathcote Williams in the past, and when we'd actually recorded London, and I scored out that melody for London, but then I kept the groove going, and he sang the Shelley text, which was really interesting as a near contemporary text about London. Much more outward anger in Shelley than the Blake is a more suppressed rage to me about London in the way he delivers it. But the Shelley, with this absolutely kind of damning indictment of London and certain people in it, I thought was so powerful. And it really worked, reciting that over the groove that we'd done, I think. But I think Kieran is particularly sensitive to that as a performer. But that came from him, really, that choice of poem. So it was a collaboration between us to do this.
city much like London, a populous and smoky city. There are all sorts of people undone, and there is little or no fun done. Small justice shown, and still less pity. There's a Castles and a Canning, a Cobbett and a Castlereagh. All sorts of caitiff corpses planning, all sorts of cousining for trepanning. Corpses less corrupt than they. There is a shit who has lost his wits or sold them, none knows which, and walks about a double ghost, and though as thin as fraud almost, ever grows more grim and rich. There is a chancery court, a king, a manufacturing mob, a set of thieves who themselves are set, similar thieves to represent an army and a public debt, which last is a scheme of paper money and means being interpreted. Bees, keep your wax, give us the honey, and we will plant while skies are sunny flowers which in winter serve instead. And there is great talk of revolution and great chance of despotism. German soldiers, camps, confusion, tumults, lotteries, rage, delusion, gin, suicide and Methodism. Taxes too on wine and bread and meat and beer and tea and cheese, from which these patriots pure are fed, who gorge themselves before they reel to bed. The tenfold essence of all these. Lawyers, judges, old hobnobbers are there, bailiffs, chancellors, bishops, great and little robbers, rhymesters, pamphleteers, stock jobbers, men of glory from the wars. Thrusting, toiling, wailing, moiling, frowning, preaching, such a riot, each with never-ceasing labour, while he thinks he cheats his neighbour, cheating his own hours of quiet. And all of these meet at levees, dinners, convivial and political, suppers of epic poets, teas where small talk dies in agonies, breakfast professional and critical, lunches and snacks so aldermanic that one would furnish for 10 dinners where reigns are Crete and tongue panic, less news, rust, Dutch or Alemannic. At conversazione, balls, conventicles and drawing rooms, courts of law, committees, calls of a morning, clubs, bookstalls, churches, masquerades, and tombs. And this is hell. And in this smother, all are damnable and damned. Each one damning damns the other. They are damned by one another. By none other are they damned.
Settings of the poems by Jenny Lewis and Omar Savach. Both poets sent me a reading of their poem and left me to add a backing to each. In both cases, I thought of a piece of music that I'd already played around with or worked with and reworked that. And this is something I often do. I kind of feel there's a long tradition of this, of composers in the past just reusing and reworking stuff, and we tend to often, as poets do, tend to often write the same thing over and over again, so I don't feel any problem with that. For Jenny's piece, I actually went back to the oldest surviving song, the song of Sikalos, which you may have come across it before. It's the oldest surviving melody, which was written on a stele somewhere near Ephesos. And it's a very kind of it's a beautiful, simple pentatonic melody, which I'd reharmonised, and I got Lizzie to kind of sing it over it, to improvise a harmony over it. But I felt there's a very plaintive aspect to that song. The song of Sikolos is about it's a man writing to his wife saying, you know, it's written on his wife's grave, and it's about kind of live brightly while you can because life is short. And so that seems an appropriate kind of melody to take because it has this kind of mournful aspect, and actually, you know, isn't that far away from Palestine geographically. And with Omar's very powerful poem, I actually took a melody I'd written before and just adapted it and played around with the melody I'd written for a Blake poem, and I just adapted that. And I think, you know, when you're playing the text, you often play around with the melody, with the text. You record something, you put the two together. You may shift a bit of the text every so often, you know, a bit to give a bit of a pause at a certain point, because the music extends it by a long way, and you can't try and compress it too much. You have to have space for the sound.
A poem by Jenny Lewis. How can we comfort each other when we can't comfort them? We who are made complicit by history, we who are able to choose how to spend our days, the park with its trees letting go of its last leaves, the ducks and swans on the pond floating to conserve energy, allowing the wind to push them towards evening, and the bonfires of an autumn sky. What use are the minutes of my life in which I can feed my cat, talk to my neighbours, check my bank account, go to the corner shop for tins of chopped tomatoes that I can now open with a can opener powered by batteries? What use or excuse that I also have been injured, know the pain of broken bones, my femur that once carried me triumphant over the hurdles, now frail as a reed, ready to be bundled. My body has turned against me in the sleepless nights. It plans insurrections, rebellions. I hear its dry rustlings like sheaves afraid of the threshing machine, or a child on a faraway hill blowing notes through a grass stem held between her fingers. I imagine my skeleton has been replaced by 100 flutes. I imagine my skeleton has been replaced by an old church organ, the organist hunched over it, dressed in leather, and the leather of the bellows makes a broken wheeze as the congregation pales and deceases. I feel the need to go to church, to find respite in those disbelieved rituals that still might rinse the darkness from me. How can we comfort each other if we can't comfort them? What right have we to be living when they are only offered a choice of endings by whatever powers of hell come out of the dark pavilions of the terrible death-delivering sky? And I am being forced to allow it. Let there be no building on the mass graves of innocence. Let there be another flood. Let the water rise up and cover everything, but this time no arks and no rescues. Let our eyeballs that watched in silence hang like pearls among the coral reefs. Let the deep rise up with all its creatures. Let the dead become forests.
CNN, etc. for Muhammad Sabah. The old man buries his head in his hands, his eyes downcast, lowered. The inside of his palms are secret maps he seems to be questioning. His jowls have grown looser and flabbier of late. His heart has aged. This is Beirut, he seems to say, a place for an old man to get heavier and older. Though the TV still blares its rot, he doesn't seem to be listening anymore as the day's end dies, as we've come to expect. Bombs, the night's fluting. The news person waxes on. But what's to understand? That murder can be finessed, that violence and hate can find themselves told in a smoothening, softening tale? The old man shivers with the cold. The collateral damage grows on the screen. These are the fallen petals from the sun-sprung flowers of what might have been. He looks up now with tears in both his eyes. This is Lebanon, he whispers, the land of my father.
The Lament for Gaza was originally a piece that I did with practically all the people who were involved in Confluence during the last attacks on Gaza about 8-9 years ago, when Gaza was being bombed. And I worked with Nuzhat Abbas, who took a Palestinian melody and put a Punjabi text of a lament for Gaza against it. And at the same time, we sang a traditional Hebrew lament against them. We felt the juxtaposition of those two melodies was very important. And we did a Confluence recording, and we even did a YouTube video that Abbas, Nuzhat's husband, put together this film. So we kind of came back to the Gaza lament, and we actually recorded a version with Nuzhat singing in Punjabi. Lizzie Spike, who I've written a lot of these pieces for, sang a German text, which is the Swords into Plowshares text, which was actually used on German protests in the 80s and 90s. So she sang this kind of traditional text, and I actually improvised the Rafiq Al-Ra poem over that. I just found that was the best way to express that poem, was to improvise it. We created a very powerful, repetitive sequence, quite like one of these kind of Baroque ground bass things that go on and on. And so we recreated that kind of underlying, quite powerful kind of rhythm. And then all these parts were interweaved over it. When it came to doing the performances we did near Christmas, which were combining Christmas carols and stories of refugees and stories of displacement, and basically trying to a kind of Dickensian attempt to encourage some kind of empathy for others by using Christmas and actually comparing what is happening in the world. And so the Lament for Gaza seemed to be the best thing to bring in at the end, or towards the end of this piece called Still No Room at the Inn. And for that, I actually scored out the melody I'd improvised so that sopranos could sing the If I Must Die melody. And we translated Nuzhat's very powerful Punjabi poem, and we translated that into English as a very kind of relentless statement of the horror that's happening. Because I think the If I Must Die is incredibly powerful for what it doesn't say and for the kind of change of perspective it gives. So we kind of balance that with this almost like predictable account of the horror. And so the piece goes through these three sections of the Lament for Gaza. It's based on translating and expanding what Nuzhat Abbas had written, and then bringing in the German text as a soaring soprano over that, and then bringing in If I Must Die as the culmination of it. The text for the Gaza Lament poem, as translated from Nuzhat Abbas, was put together by Lynn Hopkins from the Black Police Choir and me, working together, batting stuff backwards and forwards to try and capture the power of Nuzhat's original text in Punjabi.
na, di, na, da, tin, na, din, da, ge, terra, kit, tu, na, ka, ta, da, ge, terra, kit, din, na, na.
And now, a poem about jazz by Derek Sellon.
This is a poem about Hiromi Uehara, the very active, very creative, very jubilant jazz pianist. She is all verb. She knows the piano, outside and in, dives wrist deep under the lid, tweaks music from the strings, leans into the keyboard, kneels on stool, stands, bounces on toes, slams, hammers, prowls the keys, smiles in ecstatic play, dips face, hiding in her hair, sighs, mutters, scowls, idles note by note, loops, lasers, trills, tinkles, ripples, pounces, triggers 3 shots of sound. The piano is her roller skates, her spaceship, her trampoline, her trapeze, her vaulting horse, her show pony, her kayak, her rapids, her shady pool, her place to play, to ride, to be, to do, to be, to do, to be, to do. She is all verb.
Next, a short section from Sarah Acton's long poem, Book of the X, the product of her Keywords residency, key spelt Q-U-A-Y. You can find more details about this project and a link to the full poem at poetryworthhearing.biz.
Who speaks? Sailor is the keeper of the solitary star. Oh, lay us up at this quayside quay. Who comes down to welcome me home? I lift the anchor, ride the waves, I'll jump the cask, I'll lace the main. But my life is a wild vessel and free, and on land let no man tell me what to do. So lay us up at this quayside quay. Who dares come down to welcome me home? I carry the weight, the strain, the beam, and only your prayer can save us. No soul waves us or lights a fire to see us safe. We are the unionless working hands, the working hands who carry yet and carry again the load on our backs. Unpack this great wide earth into a clear glass bottle, delivered straight to your door. We are the working hands, lovers of strange, shadowy, slippery creatures, and north is our pole. But ropes tie us to worldly desires, and I don't lie. Take this from the nameless grunt I am to you, and the necessary demise of my dispensable head and withered thigh and trunk that you bartered and beat down to owe what I already gave you, over and over and over. And not freeze or binds, I know this. This is Geish, a solemn bond to be better, and you are tied to my story now, forever knotted. Come and go, I come and go, invisible paths, invisible roads. The working hands, yes, cast us off, we ride the odds. Hey ho, hey ho, hey ho, hey ho. And here's a nip to Iska, the spirits of X River, and that grey woman up there in the window. Madam, send us off with your favour. Have mercy on us all. Who speaks? Redcoat Guide, the keeper of story. From quiet cathedral heart, see how the streets flow down. You can touch any building of heavy tree stone. Go on. It's oven warm. The pubs and courtyards, alleys, law courts like loaves. Rise to the narrows, the cobbled side streets, draws gravity down the ancient footways past hospitals to where these boats landfall, outside the safety of the city walls. Beyond, see the multi-storey car park after the gentle rise from the underpass on the overgrown path, and listen, the gatekeeper wipes grease from his hands to take that cheese and ham sandwich you offer, for there are many ways to cross this wide road, and everything flows to the quay. Water draws us down, draws us out, draws us under, sold in 3-a-penny buckets from water carts, hawked by bearers with hooped yokes, firemen pump power jets, ships, wool, kayaks, swans, tall sit to span sky's mirror. Take it in, but river, oh river, bless us. But the river tells its own legend, summons this city to old commands. I wouldn't want to miss this. I wouldn't want to miss this. Who speaks? A Thames barge is keeper of distances. They say he sleeps at his desk, and the wharfinger once dreamed that the swifts did not come to the marshes. It was early summer, and then it was late summer, and they did not come. The bees swarmed in Paris Street, and a hurricane came. A ball of fire prophesied the end. The river smelt of sulphur, and it was cleared for the basin, prisoners up to their waists in stinking, thick mud. Salmon made gold the water shine on, and when the labourers staggered to higher ground, they cupped river water gently across each other's bodies to release their pockets and limbs, and found that the pockets were stuffed with nuggets and jewels, and these men slipped from the west side of the city. The water side is like that. You can become invisible, become water, slip through the net. And I'll tell you a story. This was all clubland here. Tiffany's, Mambo boxes, the Key Club, warehouse. And I remember those sailors in the Bishops sucking on clay pipes. Sailors just like you imagine them to be, all twinkling eyes, belly, loud laughter that shakes the foundations of decency and pulls you into their arms willingly. There must be a word for whatever we know being less than it was before. River says we can be sure of nothing except them. Who speaks? Cricklepit Bridge, keeper of speed. I once overheard the wharfinger having a conversation with his dog on a mobile phone. You know he loves that cockapoodle, although he says she put on weight in lockdown. I'm carrying the floaters down. I'm stocked with carp for anglers, chasing cargoes past the gate. I'm archived in the dark for years. We're following the fleet. Go. Pass here. Go. Slip through. To sea. Go. Join the great river hunt. Go. Who speaks? Double locks, keeper of relics. Below the strung-up tethers and starched cloth racks, the Shilhai women stand pulling up the heavy, heavy fleece, hand over hand, shoulder to shoulder across the X, trench-footed, shoulders hunched away from its raised slopes. But Canal begins its story fresh each day. Towmen rule the towpaths, working horses, tough men, haven banks, rough, lawless. They'll drag you down if you don't pay a handsome toll. But I'll give you a story about a longship went by here, and the rowers were warriors, and they threw down their glowing praise for river until it blushed and the waters were all peaches and reds of sunset, and river let them pass to invade. Swords were thrown in solemn thanks for this great event. Poems made. Who speaks? Modern wharfinger, keeper of realms. You see, you're thinking about the movement of water all day, and there's always water running through, praise on your mind. You're watching the weather, you're watching the water and the river all the time, and then when it comes up, you shut the gates quick. Behind those pepper pots there are stanchions, and under the benches there are metal slats, makes up a defence. Managing the levels of X are electronic alarms, and they beep to the harbour masters who come down to adjust the levels. Hold the wall against Sailwind, hold the wall against Pender, hold back Howl, Keenwealth, hold back the flood advancing in a millimetre. For I am the fixer, make things smooth, bring the future together, tame the wild danger.
And now, a poem from Claire Parker.
This poem is called Song for the Beloved. Beloved, what is our song? Is one written that we could sing? Shall we write a song in our own key and tempo? I thought of innocence and experience. Were we 1,000 kisses deep too soon? Were we carried away? Was that love? Being carried away? I heard your broken lyrics yesterday, singing with accusation of love distanced by a necessary space, singing of the hurt and the cooling, love's heart left outside, a child without clothes wanting to be warmed. Outside is not love, outside is not carried away. Beloved, hear me sing a fragment of a song that's not of general truth or universal fact of life, but a little truth, a sliver of subjectivity that one of us, by chance me, needs space within our unity. A twist of space-time, my time, not for unravelling but accepting. Could we sing this song? And you, beloved, what of you? Your infinite longing for arms to hold you, your fear unto death of being left outside, outside in the cold, seemingly pushed? Is this a little truth of you, not for unravelling but accepting? Are distance and love inversely related for you? Why then such sadness in the nodes of love's ecstasy when closeness is one? Is this an impossible song? Could we improvise? Could you find the lyrics you need me to sing? Could I learn them? Could you learn mine? They are not hard and unloving, not if trust grows within our space like clover in a fallow field. Beloved, in my dreams my space is not rejection. My space is simple, like that of a foal playing in a meadow of long green grass.
And finally, Diana Sanders, with her group of poets and musicians from North Wales, presents a sequence of eco-poems.
The poems you're about to hear form part of a collection called I Am Nature, Environmental Poetry, due to be published by Beneficia Publications this spring. It's a collection that focuses on the beauty of the natural world and the spiritual connection we can sometimes feel with our surroundings. The poets featured in this collection are Leif Pettit, Diana Sanders, Andrew Sumner, and Patricia Sumner, all of whom live in northeast Wales. The hope is that I Am Nature will instill in the reader a sense of oneness with all living things, so that we can move towards a more caring and hopeful future for the planet and its diverse inhabitants.
The music was written by Diana Sanders, Pete Regan, and Will Sumner. Each musician responded to the poems in their own unique way. For example, in the poem Fragile as a Thread of Silk, Will uses a minor key to give the music a brooding quality, and slowly builds up the rhythm, energy and volume to suggest the fire growing hotter and wilder. In The Man Who Called Back the Fishes, Diana uses rhythms as the main basis for the music to recreate the pops, whistles and rhythmic noises of a coral reef. In Pilgrim, Pete uses two guitars echoing each other to suggest the connection between the woman and the hare. The poems are complete on their own, but the music adds something new that the poet may not have imagined.
Collision. Andromeda speeds towards us. Eventually, our planet, sun, galaxy will all be gone. Yet, as I write, someone is planning their lover's murder. An insult is slipping from practiced lips. A fist strikes a tender cheek. Andromeda's course is set, its path inevitable. Meanwhile, rent rises and starving families sleep in cars. Social media sneers publicly. Another soldier needlessly dies. Bombs turn homes to rubble. And as Andromeda races on, I know for certain that love, in the time that we have, is air and equity. That kindness is food and peace. Compassion is dignity. That as this gleaming blue-green sphere whirls through uncertainty, our sharing, caring and striving are life and law. That as knowledge and story are extinguished in a mighty galactic blast, as heavenly bodies separate to float alone in icy dark, the crackling hum of expanding emptiness will forever hold the word of love.
Fragile as a thread of silk. Fragile as a thread of silk, our pale flame, conceived in the tiny raging of a match, licks delicately at dry birch twigs. We add more sticks, found beneath the yellowing tree. Cautious pops, cracks and hissing as our flame begins to writhe in raiment of garnet and amber. We pause and let the new kindled creature, diaphanous and fey, frolic and leap for joy. Damp wood releases swirls of smoke, vaporous, warm, pungent, entwining with soft zephyrs. Our dancing child of autumn is slowly fed with rain-soaked leaves, more twigs, rose prunings, bean haulms and scented stems of lavender. We stand back a while in watery sunlight and watch the maundering smoke seeping and roiling upwards from earth-bound mould. Our child has grown assertive in our care. We pile on more to fuel its insatiable hunger, while around us the day is tarnished by the dusk. Shadows rise, an evening tide that floods the land, and yellow birch leaves lose their radiance. But our fire grows hotter, keener, crueler. We see dancing flames transmute base matter into heat and light that reaches to heaven. But we starve the flames to let them know that despite their power, they too are mortal.
To a small magpie moth. Late evening, worn thin, I'm as fragile as your wings, fearful for the future. Still you are here, in my kitchen, where this morning you sat motionless on the window pane, held back, not understanding glazing, your pied freckles lit like stained glass, now a shadow on the ceiling. I waft a tea towel, you beat your wings. I waft again, you flit about, seeking the light of celestial orientation. Finally, finding the dimly lit slit of doorway, you disappear into the livid sky, bruised by the rough hands of day. Flutter free, my friend, night flyer, dusk dweller, environmental barometer. Sail with the tide of the moon, a crescent scar rising in the east amongst pin pricks of planets. I gaze up, imagine every star attracting an eclipse of moths, a milky mist, a protective gauze encircling the earth. I release a prayer into the obsidian night, that we too shall be guided by light.
Pilgrim. It is the hare who is the spirit of this place. Still as the mine-cred stone, she is the waymarker, nudging me towards places of welcome. Our eyes meet, animal to animal. Hers mirror the dew-bronze morning. Separateness falls away. I feel as she feels. Colours are brighter, sounds sharper. I know the secret places. Hear the rustle of a vole in the next field. We drink from gold mirror pools, and when the shadow of a hawk blackens grass, we lie silent under scented gorse until trouble passes. Then on moonless nights, we find our way by stars and trust remembered paths to cross the untamed moor.
Dragon Rocks, Carseg. One windfell afternoon, when larches sang of spring and sea shouted shattered glass and tussled with boulders, we took the breeze path, a rain-wet rock pavement of sea-battered basalt. Edged by woods and shore, a scintillating sea sliced the basalt cliffs. Our pavement, once beneath a dark and ancient sea, baked beneath molten land, spewed out in volcanic rage. Modern waves roll landward where once a million years of solid mountains stood. Now only fissures intrude upon the igneous plain, but insinuating from a crack is a thrusting, writhing, rhyolitic spine. A dragon carcass laid to rest, ribs and limbs torn away, its head beneath the waves, tail winding among rounded stone. A prehistoric creature or broken aeroplane.
The man who called back the fishes. He began at dawn, playing reef music whilst planting coral polyps in rock crevices under the rippled, sunlit surface. He purred for shoals of angelfish, grunted for male frill-fin gobies, played the guero for the spiny lobster. The volume rose in a steady crescendo through the day until it peaked at dusk. In his dreams, he painted outlines of eels, filled in the colours of damselfish and the others who lived here before the cyclones, before the bleaching. Rhythms rode ocean currents, skirted islands, entered caves, followed rafts of driftwood. Ray by ray, fish by fish, urchins, triggerfish, shrimp, parrotfish, white-tipped sharks, reef octopus, manta ray, barracuda, trumpetfish, yellowtail snappers, glassy sweepers and starfish came back for his music. They joined in with an eruption of pops, howls, chirps and grunts, whistles, snaps, bumps, buzzes, squeals, heartbeats, teeth gnashing, tail slapping, gill flapping and staccato clicks. He floated in this new oasis, turned off the music and listened.
Summer Solstice, Villanelle. Braid my hair with dog rose and meadowsweet. Lace my neck with bindweed and bryony. Bless my head with midsummer's shining heat. Wrap mosses and bracken around my feet. Stitch me a gown of oak leaves and sweet pea. Braid my hair with dog rose and meadowsweet. Fill up my nostrils with moorland's rich peat, or verges of wild garlic and tansy. Bless my head with midsummer's shining heat. Feel the green woodpecker's fast pulsing beat as he taps on bark hidden in ivy. Braid my hair with dog rose and meadowsweet. Fashion a belt of stitchwort and cowwheat with buckles of buttercup and daisy. Bless my head with midsummer's shining heat. Dance along shorelines of thrift and seabeat. Weave me a shawl of yarrow and pansy. Braid my hair with dog rose and meadowsweet. Bless my head with midsummer's shining heat.
Beyond the blue. Beneath the filigree of unfurling oaks, an abundance of bluebells grows, almost violet and nearly blue, the colour of tranquillity, flooding the woodland floor. A haze of ultramarine, shimmering like a fine sea spray. I pause at the margin, the swell of bells at my ankles. Each nodding flower salutes the sun and chimes its love to the rising moon as dappled light dips to twilight. Between the chiff-chaff's evening chatter and a robin's dreamy lullaby, a silvery tinkle sings. Please enter quietly as you leave the world of illusion behind. I cast off my outer self, lay it down, folded with my shoes at the shore. I enter, barefoot, slip under the rippling indigo surface and surrender my body to silken flora. I lie enveloped in coolness, surrounded by the gentle lap of swaying stems, breathing with the leaves. I inhale the verdant scent of gratitude. Exhaling, I release, sap rising in my veins, pulsating with the pulse of plant and tree and earth. I am the woods, and the woods are me.
That's all for episode 29 of Poetry Worth Hearing. More information about poets, artists, publications and texts of unpublished poems at poetryworthhearing.biz. I hope you've enjoyed listening.